People think intelligence saves you, but the truth is, it destroys you first. It makes you see what others can't, forces you to think while everyone else just reacts, and leaves you alone in the noise of those who shout without understanding. Being truly intelligent is not a gift, it's a burden. And when that intelligence is combined with calm, with discipline, with philosophy, it becomes dangerous. Dangerous because no one can manipulate someone who has learned to govern himself. History proves it. The wise have always been the most feared. Not because they imposed force, but because they didn't need to. In a world where everyone seeks approval, the one who thinks for himself becomes a threat. So today, if you're here, you're not looking for formulas for success or phrases to sound wise. You're searching for something deeper, a mental framework that allows you to keep your sanity in a world that has given up thinking. And that precisely is what separates the merely intelligent from the dangerously intelligent. Ask yourself, how many times have you reacted without thinking and later regretted it? How many times did you know what to do, but your emotions took control? That's where most people fail, not from lack of knowledge, but from lack of discipline. The Stoic doesn't seek to know more. He seeks to feel less of what doesn't serve him. He doesn't run from emotion. He translates it into clarity. He doesn't aim to appear brilliant. He aims to remain unshaken. And that the ability to stay centered when everything is burning is the highest form of intelligence there is. We live in an era where noise is mistaken for thought, where giving opinions is easier than understanding, where reacting has become a sport. Everyone wants to be right, few want peace. Everyone wants to win arguments, but no one wants to win self-control. And there lies the paradox. The truly dangerous mind is not the one that speaks the loudest, but the one that stays silent while others scream. Because the silence of the wise is more powerful than 1,000 speeches from fools. You weren't born to be a spectator of chaos, you were born to understand it. To watch how the crowd behaves without falling into its emotional contagion. Stoicism, more than a philosophy, is training for the soul. It teaches you to think precisely when others are breaking apart. To stop reacting to what isn't under your control, to guard your energy like a treasure, because whoever masters his mind masters time, and whoever masters time masters his destiny. Marcus Aurelius understood this amid wars and plagues when he wrote, "The mind's power lies in being unconquerable." Seneca knew it when he said the wise man is stronger than fate because his strength comes not from the body but from judgment. And Epictetus repeated it with clarity, "No man is free who is not master of himself." These are not ancient sayings, they are survival maps for a world where weakness disguises itself as sensitivity and impulsiveness sells itself as authenticity. Today, being rational is an act of rebellion. Being stoic is almost a revolution. Because the problem isn't feeling, the problem is being enslaved by what you feel. Emotions are not enemies, they're tools. But when they rule your mind, they destroy your discernment. Every uncontrolled impulse is a silent thief of energy, respect, and power. Learning to pause before reacting, to observe before speaking, to understand before judging, that is applied intelligence. And when you practice it, you begin to notice something strange. The world becomes more predictable. People stop confusing you. Conflicts stop dragging you down. Suddenly, you see patterns where before there was only chaos. Because the wise don't need to control everything. Understanding it is enough. But be careful, intelligence without character becomes arrogance, and calm without purpose becomes apathy. That's why, The Stoic sharpens his mind without losing his humanity. He doesn't believe he's superior. He simply demands more of himself. He doesn't seek to prove he's right. He seeks to see clearly. He doesn't compete with others. He competes with who he was yesterday. His victory is not in defeating someone else, but in not letting anyone make him lose himself. And that is the hardest victory of all, the one very few achieve. Being dangerously intelligent doesn't mean living without emotion. It means keeping emotion under control. It means being able to cry without losing composure, to get angry without destroying, to love without losing yourself. It's understanding that emotional intelligence isn't about not feeling. It's about not being enslaved by what you feel. It's recognizing anger, fear, or sadness without letting them decide for you. And once you achieve that, something changes. Situations stop dominating you, people stop confusing you, and the world stops seeming so chaotic. Because everything that once dragged you now informs you. That's the transformation you're about to live here. This episode isn't a lesson, it's a confrontation. Each rule you'll hear is a piece of the puzzle the ordinary man never completes. How to think calmly when everyone else reacts. How to stay clear in the midst of noise. How to turn every blow into an argument. Because knowledge is useless if you don't use it, and wisdom is meaningless if it doesn't change you. Let me warn you, if you apply what you're about to hear, many won't understand you anymore. They'll call you cold, distant, calculated. Don't take it as an insult. What the weak call indifference, the wise call self-control. The dangerous mind doesn't aim to please, it aims to stay lucid. And in a world where most people crumble at a critique or a silence, staying calm will be your superpower. Become wiser. That's not a suggestion, it's an order for survival. Because the reactive world destroys thinkers and glorifies the loud. But you're not here to shout. You're here to observe, to understand, and to act with precision. You're here to awaken a mind that no longer needs to prove its intelligence because it radiates it. Now listen carefully. These are not mere rules of ancient wisdom. They are warnings of modern freedom. If you understand them, nothing will shake you again. If you apply them, nothing will rule you again. Welcome to a new level of clarity. Here begin the 10 Stoic rules that will make you dangerously intelligent. Before we begin, I want you to declare your commitment by commenting, "From today, I think slowly and act with purpose." That phrase will remind you that you're here to elevate your mind, not to keep reacting like everyone else. This is your moment to prove that you no longer seek to be right, you seek to be in control. That you're not here to repeat quotes, but to embody wisdom. Today begins the most dangerous change of all, the awakening of a mind that decides to stop living on autopilot. Without further ado, let's begin. First Stoic rule: don't react, reason. Reaction is the instinct of those who don't think. Reason is the refuge of those who rule themselves. Every time you respond without pause, you hand the control of your mind over to the world. Every time you think before acting, you take it back. That is the invisible line that separates the wise from the impulsive, the observer from the explosive, the one who shapes destiny from the one who merely repeats patterns. Don't react, reason. In that phrase lies the first form of Stoic power, the one that begins everything, the one that defines everything. Imagine for a moment that every emotion you feel is a stone thrown into water. If you react to the impact, you sink with it. If you wait, the water returns to being a mirror. The mind works the same way. turbulent when it reacts, clear when it reasons. Marcus Aurelius wrote that tranquility comes from judging things as they are, not as we fear they might be. Every time you breathe before responding, you turn chaos into order. That is the true use of intelligence, transforming disturbance into understanding. The modern world glorifies immediacy. They tell us, speak your truth, don't hold back, be authentic. But authenticity without discernment is a form of slavery. What you call saying what you feel is often nothing more than obeying your impulses. And impulses don't think, they just echo old emotions, ancient wounds. The wise man feels just as you do, but he doesn't react as you do. He observes the fire, studies it, and when he finally acts, he does so with precision. That pause makes him impenetrable. Seneca said that nothing resembles madness more than anger, and he was right. When anger takes the wheel, reason disappears. Most people don't destroy their lives because of a lack of opportunity, but because of an excess of reactions. A misinterpreted message, a careless word, a look that stirs wounded pride, and the rest is handled by impulse. Regret comes later, but by then, it's too late. Those who never learn to stop repeat the same mistakes under new names. The Stoic breaks that cycle with one simple question: does this depend on me? If it doesn't, he stays silent. If it does, he acts calmly. In that simplicity lies all the wisdom of control. To reason is not to turn off your heart, it's to guide it. It's understanding that emotion is a signal, not an order. That feeling doesn't mean obeying, that you can be afraid and still move forward, be angry and still stay silent, be hurt and still remain just. True intelligence doesn't eliminate emotions, it governs them. And that takes training. No one is born wise. The mind is forged like steel with fire and repetition. When everything in you screams to respond, wait. Waiting is not weakness, it's strategy. Every second of pause expands the territory of your freedom. Epictetus taught that things themselves don't disturb us, but our opinions about them. The problem isn't what happens, it's what you interpret. When you learn to separate the two, you become invincible. What once provoked you now informs you. What once hurt you now teaches you. Pain stops being punishment and becomes a teacher. Think of the last time you lost control. In that instant, you believed that reacting made you strong, but it did the opposite. It made you predictable. The one who reacts reveals his weakness. The one who reasons becomes a mystery. Whoever masters the pause masters the world, because no one can manipulate what doesn't respond as expected. Calm confuses the impulsive. Serenity irritates those who feed on chaos. That's why inner mastery not only protects you, it elevates you. It makes you someone who doesn't need to impose himself to be respected. There are moments when silence is more powerful than 1,000 arguments. Not because silence hides cowardice, but because it holds clarity. Knowing when to speak proves that your words carry weight. The Stoic doesn't answer insult with insult, because he understands that a disturbed mind tries to spread its disturbance. He prefers to observe. He prefers to listen. He prefers to understand. Not because he fears conflict, but because he chooses his battles. Practical intelligence means not stepping into places where nothing can be gained. But there's a reaction even more dangerous than anger: self-pity. Reacting to pain by feeling like a victim is just another form of surrender. The wise man feels sadness, yes, but he turns it into perspective. He knows that everything that happens has two interpretations: the ego's and reason's. The ego says, "This shouldn't be happening to me." Reason replies, "This is teaching me something." That difference defines your destiny. Reaction builds enemies. Reason builds meaning. Reasoning also means doubting yourself. A strong mind isn't one that always has answers. It's one that knows how to ask the right questions. Why did this affect me? What part of me needs validation? What story am I repeating without realizing it? The one who questions himself grows. The one who reacts repeats himself. And every day you choose reasoning over reaction, the impulse loses power. There comes a point when external noise can no longer disturb you, because you've learned it's not the noise that unsettles you, but the echo within that responds to it. The Stoic doesn't aim to seem cold, he aims to be in control. His serenity isn't the absence of passion, but mastery over it. When others shout, he thinks. When others despair, he analyzes. When others give up, he acts with precision. That combination of calm and clarity is what makes him dangerously intelligent, because nothing unsettles mediocrity more than a man who cannot be provoked. Imagine living that way, not wasting time arguing with those who don't listen, not exhausting yourself explaining what doesn't need to be explained, not justifying every emotion. Imagine being the owner of your reactions, not because you don't feel, but because you choose how to express what you feel. That is true freedom. Not being a slave to anything that happens outside of you. A rational mind isn't one that doesn't suffer, it's one that doesn't collapse. In a world that rewards speed, stopping is an act of rebellion. In a culture that glorifies opinions, reflection is almost a crime. But if you want to be truly wise, you'll have to walk the opposite path. You'll learn to respond with a look when others shout. You'll learn to observe without interfering. You'll learn to think like someone sharpening a blade in silence, with purpose, with patience. Because the one who masters his mind needs no defense. His serenity is his shield. And one day you'll notice the difference. Where once there was anger, there will be distance. Where once there was fear, there will be understanding. Where once there was the need to react, there will be choice. At that point, you'll have become dangerous not because of your strength, but because of your balance. Because nothing intimidates more than someone who can look at chaos and keep thinking. That is the essence of this first rule. Don't react, reason. Because while the world burns, you decide when to ignite and when to remain calm. And that choice, small as it seems, changes everything. Second Stoic rule. Not everything deserves your energy. Some battles are won by refusing to fight. That's the truth the restless mind resists most. The mind that still confuses movement with progress. We believe reacting to everything keeps us alive, when in fact it drains us. We believe engaging in every dispute, responding to every provocation, correcting every mistake gives us control, when in reality it only scatters our focus. The wise don't avoid the world. They simply learn to choose where to invest their energy. And that quiet discernment is what makes them dangerously intelligent. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Lose interest in what does not belong to you." He didn't mean it as moral advice, but as a technique for survival. Mental energy is a finite resource, and spending it on what you can't change is a sophisticated form of self-destruction. The ordinary mind burns out in noise, irritated by strangers' opinions, disturbed by online chatter, tormented by things it will never control. The Stoic, on the other hand, doesn't confuse importance with proximity. If something doesn't depend on him, he observes it. If it does, he acts. Everything else he lets pass. That clarity is his freedom. Every time you feel tempted to respond to provocation, remember this. Fire isn't put out by more fire. Every unnecessary word feeds the flame of distraction. Every unnecessary reaction steals time from your purpose. The wise conserve their strength not out of cowardice but out of precision. Not everything deserves a response because not everything has value. Epictetus taught that true greatness lies in letting others speak while you keep your center. Whoever is shaken by small things shows he still hasn't mastered the great. We live in an age where attention has become the new currency. Everything and everyone competes to steal a few seconds of your awareness. And in that economy of distraction, the wise become heretics. They don't look at everything, don't comment on everything, don't feel obligated to join the collective noise. They choose. They select what nourishes their mind and reject what only feeds their anxiety. That mental discipline protects them from the emotional manipulation that enslaves the rest. Because whoever doesn't know where to place his attention ends up living a life designed by others. Seneca said, "Life isn't short, we just waste it." And we waste it when we give our energy to what builds nothing. You drain yourself arguing with people who don't listen, trying to explain yourself to those who don't care to understand, defending your name to those who already decided not to believe you. That need for validation is the silent enemy of intelligence. The smarter you are, the more selective you must become with your battles, not out of pride, but out of respect for the time that won't return. Serenity doesn't mean isolating yourself from the world. It means engaging without contamination. You can stand in the middle of noise and remain calm if you learn to distinguish between what's urgent and what's important. The wise know their attention is their sword. It cuts through distraction, protects concentration, and is only drawn when there's purpose. That's why, while the crowd argues about everything, the Stoic invests his energy in building what endures. The dangerous mind doesn't waste itself proving it's right. It uses its energy to create. But to reach that point, you must first recognize your energy leaks. Observe what agitates you easily. A comment, a critique, someone's silence. Every automatic reaction reveals a weakness. The modern world feeds on those cracks. Brands sell you belonging. The media sells you outrage. Social networks sell you attention. And while you buy all that, you lose the most precious thing you have: focus. The wise understand that distraction is the new slavery. Whoever doesn't control his attention doesn't control his life. It's not about becoming indifferent, but about becoming selective. The difference is purpose. The indifferent person doesn't feel. The selective person feels but chooses where to place emotion. He doesn't answer every attack because he knows each one costs him balance. He doesn't carry every problem because he understands not all problems are his. He doesn't try to save everyone because he's learned some people only want company and they're sinking. The Stoic doesn't flee the world, but he doesn't drown in it either. His distance isn't coldness, it's emotional intelligence. Learning to withdraw your energy from what doesn't deserve it is an act of power. Because the world feeds on your reactions. Every time you get upset, you feed something unworthy of your energy. Every time you respond to noise, you confirm its importance. The wise break that circuit. They watch the chaos but don't enter it. Their mind remains like a lake. The wind ripples its surface, but the depths stay still. That calm makes them impossible to manipulate. Marcus Aurelius warned, "If the external disturbs you, it's not the external, it's your judgment of it." That line should be engraved in every mind seeking serenity. You can't control the world, but you can control the interpretation you make of it. Energy follows attention. Whatever you look at grows. Focus on provocation and anger. Grows. Focus on purpose and clarity grows. It's not magic, it's mental direction, and mastering that direction is the highest Stoic art. When someone tries to provoke you, ask whether they seek truth or control. Most arguments aren't about understanding, they're about domination. The wise don't play that game. They don't need to win. They need to understand. And once they understand, they withdraw without guilt. Because they know silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes it's the most elegant form of victory. Every time you choose not to react to the small, you strengthen your mind for the great. That is the gymnasium of the soul. With time, you'll notice the energy you withdraw from noise turns into clarity. You start having time for yourself, for thinking, for creating. The outer voices fade, the inner one grows. And when that inner voice grows, everything changes. You stop begging for attention and start radiating it. You stop seeking respect and start embodying it. Because the energy you once wasted on arguments is now invested in self-mastery, and that mastery is what makes you truly powerful. Remember, not everything that calls you deserves your response. Not everything that touches you deserves your devotion. Not everything that provokes you deserves your time. The wise don't burn out, they protect themselves. Not because they fear losing, but because they know their energy is the raw material of destiny. Where they place it, life flourishes. Where they waste it, it withers. And in a world that glorifies distraction, preserving focus is the most revolutionary act of all. So when you feel the urge to respond, first ask if it's worth your energy. If it's not, smile and move on. Because every needless battle won by silence is an investment in your peace. And every time you choose serenity over pride, you move one step closer to wisdom. That is the truly dangerous mind, the one that doesn't need to react to prove its power. And while the rest exhaust themselves fighting for things that don't matter, you'll be busy building something no one can take from you, your inner mastery. Third Stoic rule: observe more than you speak. Most people talk to fill emptiness, but the wise observe to understand it. Silence is not the absence of voice, it's presence without the need for noise. Those who observe master what others barely notice, because while the rest rush to give opinions, the observer has already understood. This rule is more than advice, it's a warning. Words without observation are noise, and noise is the grave of understanding. We live in a time where everyone wants to be heard, but few want to listen. The world is full of voices repeating what they've never reflected upon. Everyone comments, almost no one contemplates. Marcus Aurelius knew this. He who knows speaks little. Not out of arrogance, but because he understood that words without inner roots are wasted air. The wise don't need to announce their wisdom. Their calm reveals it for them. The mind that observes first and speaks later becomes precise, sharp, almost lethal. That's why this rule is dangerous. Because intelligent silence is more feared than any speech. To observe is not merely to look, it is to perceive without judgment. It's understanding what hides behind gestures, tones, and silences. When you talk too much, you stop seeing. When you observe, you notice what noise conceals. The Stoic uses silence as a tool to measure others, to understand the environment, to hear even what is not said. Every pause reveals more than a conversation could. Every attentive look becomes information. Every moment of listening becomes a map the impulsive will never read. Observation is a form of power because it gives you an advantage over time. While others act without thinking, you gather data, understand patterns, anticipate moves. Seneca said that a wise mind never rushes because hasty conclusions are enemies of truth. The urge to speak comes from ego. The patience to understand comes from mastery. The wise don't need to fill the space, they let the space speak to them. Epictetus taught that nature gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth to remind us to listen twice as much as we speak. That proportion is the formula for practical intelligence. But the modern world has inverted it. Today, everyone wants to teach without having learned, advise without having lived, correct without having understood. The wise, however, sit in silence and allow reality to reveal itself. They don't need to impose interpretation because they trust observation. Their mind doesn't rush to label, it simply looks and absorbs. That inner stillness makes them impossible to deceive. Observing more than you speak is also an act of humility. It means accepting that you don't know everything, that perhaps the other person has something to show you, that even in error there's a lesson. The wise don't look to judge, they look to learn. Every person, every situation, every silence is a lesson. But only those who observe calmly can receive it. The rest, distracted by their need to talk, let the gold of experience slip away. And this isn't about repressing yourself. It's about directing your words like a well-sharpened weapon. Words are arrows. If you shoot them without aim, they wound at random. If you hold them too long, they turn to poison. Observation teaches you when to speak and when to stay silent, when a word can build and when it can only destroy. That's why the wise don't speak from emotion, but from clarity. They don't seek to impress, they seek to contribute. They don't need to be heard, they need to be understood. That difference separates them from the rest. Those who observe understand, and those who understand rarely need to justify. That's why wise people seem mysterious, because they don't explain everything they know. They let others reveal themselves. Every unnecessary word they keep is a truth they protect. In a world that wastes information, silence becomes an art. The wise cultivate it until their very presence communicates more than 1,000 speeches. Observation also means observing yourself. The mind that looks outward but forgets to look inward becomes critical but not conscious. The Stoic directs his gaze inward first. Why does this affect me? What emotion am I trying to hide by talking so much? Every unfiltered word is a leak of energy. Every unreflected reaction is a reflection of something unresolved. Self-observation lets you detect and seal those leaks. It allows you to feel the pulse of your mind and recognize its storms before they break. Self-awareness is born from silence. There is nothing more powerful than someone who can listen without losing themselves. Such a person doesn't need to raise their voice to be noticed. Their attention says everything. When you truly listen to someone, you exercise a subtle kind of power, the power of understanding. Few comprehend it, but everyone feels it. That ability to listen more than you speak disarms egos, heals conflicts, reveals truth. Because where there is real listening, there is no need to impose. The world fears observers because they cannot be manipulated. While everyone reacts to the stimulus of the moment, the observer sees the structure behind the chaos. They don't need to predict the future, they read it in the present. Every gesture, every word, every emotion becomes information that the wise translate into perspective. That's why their silence makes others uncomfortable, because in their stillness people see themselves reflected, and there is no mirror more merciless than the mind that understands without judging. Speaking less doesn't mean disconnecting. It means participating consciously rather than compulsively. It means that when you speak, your words carry weight, that when you give your opinion, it comes from experience, not impulse. That when you teach, it's from practice, not vanity. The wise don't seek to be right, they seek to be useful. And when their words aren't useful, they stay silent. That balance makes them architects of thought. Sometimes, wisdom lies not in answering, but in letting silence answer for you. There are moments when your calm explains more than any argument. When someone tries to provoke you, your observation denies them a stage. When someone tries to manipulate you, your attention unmasks them. Observation is both defense and attack. It protects you from deceit and gives you the advantage of understanding. That's why the greatest strategists, philosophers, and leaders share one trait. They listen more than they speak. Over time, you'll discover that observing is an act of love. Love for truth, for clarity, for reality as it is. And you'll discover that silence doesn't isolate you, it amplifies you. In it, your mind breathes, your spirit realigns, your intuition sharpens. Because only when you stop filling the world with your voice can you finally hear what the world is trying to tell you. This rule doesn't ask you to always be silent. It asks you to speak only when your words are more valuable than your silence. That principle separates the wise from the talkers, the thinkers from the opinion givers. The noise of the world won't disappear, but you can choose not to add to it. You can choose to be the calm amid the shouting, the eye that truly sees while everyone else just looks. Observe more than you speak, not because silence is refuge, but because it is power. Every word you withhold gives you strength. Every observation made in calm grants you vision. Every time you choose to look before you speak, you train your mind to think with precision. And when you think with precision, you become unshakable. The wise man who observes without haste doesn't just understand the world, he anticipates it. And that ability to see before others is what makes him truly dangerous, because while the rest react to the present, he is already building the future. So when the noise of the world tries to drag you back into distraction, remember this rule: guard your words like treasure and give your attention like art. Because in that balance lies the beginning of wisdom, the kind that turns pain into thought. Fourth Stoic rule: turn pain into thought. Every human being carries within a wound they never asked for. Some hide it behind smiles, others disguise it with pride, others drag it like an invisible weight. But a few choose differently, they transform it into wisdom. That is the difference between those who merely suffer and those who awaken. Pain doesn't disappear, it transforms. And that process, raw, lonely, and necessary, is what defines the strength of a Stoic soul. Suffering, in its essence, is not punishment, it's information. It reveals the limits you thought you had, the dependencies you couldn't see, the expectations that ruled you. But most people don't listen. They react, they run, they complain. And in that flight, they waste the message pain was trying to deliver. Marcus Aurelius wrote in the midst of his own adversity, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Pain isn't there to stop you, it's there to redirect you. But only those who think can understand that. Turning pain into thought is an act of spiritual intelligence. It means refusing to be a victim not out of pride, but out of understanding. It's taking what hurts you and asking, what is this trying to show me? What part of me needs to be rebuilt? That's the difference between the one who sinks and the one who rises. Both feel the blow, but only one stops to analyze it. One seeks meaning, the other seeks someone to blame. And only the first becomes free. Stoicism doesn't promise to erase pain, it teaches you to tame it. It doesn't tell you to run from the wound, but to observe it until you understand its language. Because every pain is an unfinished conversation with yourself. Loss speaks of attachment, betrayal speaks of expectation. Loneliness speaks of dependence, rejection speaks of the value you gave away to others. But if you stay stuck in suffering, you'll never hear the message. Thinking about pain is how you translate it, and through that translation you disarm it. Seneca wrote, "No wind is favorable to one who doesn't know where he's sailing." Pain is that unexpected wind that tears down your planned routes. It strips you of control, forces you to sail without a map, to look inward. It's not cruel, it's instructive. Without pain, you'd never look toward what truly matters. Comfort dulls you, but pain awakens you. It's the most severe yet most honest teacher. It teaches without words, but only to those who keep their minds open enough to listen. Most people look for anesthesia. They seek distraction, noise, something to cover the wound. But anesthesia doesn't heal it, only delays. The Stoic, on the other hand, sits in front of his pain, as if in front of a mirror. He contemplates it calmly, even with respect. Not because he enjoys it, but because he knows that in that mirror his true nature is revealed. Epictetus said it plainly, "It's not what happens to you that destroys you, but how you respond to it." The suffering isn't in the event, it's in the interpretation. And that interpretation can be rewritten through thought. Think of your deepest wounds, the days when everything felt like it was collapsing. The nights when your mind wouldn't stop and your soul begged for relief. If you can look back today and speak of it without breaking, it means you've already thought it through, you've processed it. Your mind has turned it into something useful. That is Stoic thought in action, turning experience into wisdom, the blow into a lesson, the loss into purpose. The wise aren't defined by how little they suffer, but by what they do with their suffering. Pain, when thought through, becomes fuel. Without it, there is no depth, no awareness, no character. Marcus Aurelius lost 8 children, saw friends die, was betrayed by those he loved most. Yet he didn't grow bitter, he grew lucid. Instead of cursing fate, he analyzed it. Instead of drowning in grief, he used it to understand the fragility of being human. That is the highest Stoic gesture, to look at your wound without resentment and still choose virtue. Turning pain into thought is a form of inner alchemy. It means transforming what burns into light, what weighs you down into wisdom. It's realizing that every disappointment sharpens the mind, every loss cleanses the soul, every blow refines your understanding of what truly matters. Those who pass through suffering without reflection only collect scars. Those who reflect gain depth, and that depth cannot be faked. It's felt in their voice, their gaze, their calm. There's a moment in pain when the mind rebels. It wants answers, justice, meaning now. But meaning doesn't appear when you demand it. It appears when you observe without anger. Thought is patience. It's waiting for clarity to come on its own, and it always does. Sometimes as understanding, sometimes as acceptance, but always as order emerging from chaos. The wise don't ask, "Why me?" They ask, "What for within me?" That slight shift changes everything. It takes you from victim to student, because As long as you think pain happens to you, you'll stay trapped in the wound. But when you realize it happens for you, something changes. You stop hating it and start using it. That understanding doesn't erase pain, but it gives it direction, and direction is power. Thought turns raw emotion into clarity. Where there was guilt, there's now understanding. Where there was fear, there's now strategy. Where there was rage, there's now discernment. It's not about denying what you feel, it's about directing it. The Stoic doesn't forbid himself to cry. He simply doesn't let his tears blind him. Cry if you must, but then think. Because pain left unexamined becomes resentment, and resentment is wisdom's mortal enemy. Sometimes thought shows up as writing, sometimes as silence, sometimes as a conversation with yourself. The key is not to run. Don't cover pain with noise, translate it with attention. Every reflection is a tool, every question a compass. What part of me needs to mature so this doesn't destroy me? That single question can turn chaos into lesson. Pain doesn't stop hurting, but it stops ruling you once you understand it. The Stoic looks back without resentment because he knows even injustice taught him something. Seneca called it the hidden benefit, the gift disguised as misfortune. Everything that made you suffer also trained you. It taught you to tell the essential from the trivial, genuine love from attachment, strength from rigidity. Suffering is the teacher that polishes the rough stone of your character, and if you can think it through, it turns you into someone who no longer reacts from the wound, but from wisdom. Some pains are never overcome, they're integrated. You don't forget them, you understand them. And through understanding, they stop being enemies. They become part of your story, but no longer rule your present. That integration is pure thought. It's recognizing that what was couldn't have been otherwise because it was necessary for your growth. The wise don't try to erase their past. They honor it as a source of understanding. When you learn to turn pain into thought, life changes its texture. You stop fearing the fall because you know each one brings information. You stop hating change because you see it as the only constant. You stop cursing loss because you recognize it as a reminder that nothing truly belongs to you. What once paralyzed you now trains you. What once hurt you now teaches you. That's the power of thought to turn the wound into direction. Epictetus was a slave, humiliated, beaten, but his mind was freer than his master's. His freedom didn't come from the absence of pain, but from the clarity with which he interpreted it. Don't say you've suffered, say you've learned. That phrase could summarize this entire rule. Pain doesn't define you, your interpretation does. Every thought is a choice to turn the wound into wisdom or into bitterness, and that choice renews itself daily. When you learn to think through your pain, you become dangerous to a world that feeds on emotional chaos. You stop reacting. You stop playing the victim. You stop blaming. And that emotional independence confuses people. No one can manipulate you when you've made peace with your shadows. No one can use you when you've reconciled with your past. No one can break you when you've understood the value of what you lost. So when life hits you, and it will, don't ask how to escape. Ask what you can learn. What part of you must die so something wiser can be born? What belief, what fear, what dependency must dissolve for you to move forward? Pain doesn't arrive to destroy you. It arrives to dismantle what no longer serves you. And that dismantling, though painful, is the beginning of your transformation. Remember, what isn't thought through is repeated. What is thought through is transcended. Don't run from pain. Sit with it. Write it. Observe it. dissect it, until it no longer has power over you. Because once you understand it, pain becomes a teacher. And when the teacher speaks, the mind awakens. And there, in that instant of understanding, alchemy happens. The fire that once burned now illuminates. And you, who once feared to suffer, begin to be grateful for having felt. Because without that pain, you would never have come to know yourself. And when a human being truly knows himself, nothing can destroy him. That is how the wise turn the wound into thought, and thought into strength. And only then does silence become a sacred language, the mind grows still, and the soul breathes freely. Because those who have learned to think through their pain no longer need to speak of it, their calm says everything. And in that silence that follows understanding, the next Stoic lesson is born, the most subtle and powerful of them all, realizing that silence itself speaks. Fifth Stoic rule: silence also speaks. The world fears silence because it forces it to listen. Those who can't bear to be quiet don't fear the external noise. They fear what they might discover within themselves if they stop talking. That's the truth almost no one admits. We've filled our lives with voices, screens, music, and notifications. Because silence strips us bare. It confronts us with the mind without distractions, the soul without masks. But the wise don't fear it, they seek it. Because they understand that silence is not the absence of communication, it's its highest form. Silence has its own language. One that needs no words yet says everything. In silence, intentions, fears, and hidden desires are revealed. When someone goes quiet, they aren't always avoiding. Sometimes they're protecting, thinking, observing. The Stoic knows how to use this language with surgical precision. His silence isn't emptiness, it's presence. It's not indifference, it's mastery. Because those who can remain quiet without discomfort prove that their peace doesn't depend on the noise of others. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. Perfect calm is the order of the soul. And the order of the soul shows itself in the moments when impulse wants to speak, but wisdom chooses silence. In the pause between offense and response, in the breath that separates anger from speech, inner greatness is measured. Silence, in those moments, isn't passivity, it's emotional intelligence. It's the space that separates the wise from the reactive, the free from the slave of their own emotions. Silence also reveals character. Watch someone in silence, and you'll know who they are. The insecure fill it with words, the arrogant with speeches, the wise with presence. Some silences intimidate more than any shout, because behind them lies self-knowledge. Those who can stay silent with control don't need to prove themselves, they already know who they are. And that certainty is a language of its own, the language of inner confidence. Epictetus taught that we shouldn't speak about what we haven't mastered or react to what we don't understand. Every unnecessary word is a leak of energy. Every impulsive reply is a defeat of judgment. That's why the Stoic uses silence as both shield and sword. A shield because it protects him from the emotional noise of the world. A sword because his lack of reaction disarms the provocateur. When the other expects a response and doesn't get one, they're left alone with their own emptiness. That's the silent victory of the wise. They don't need to crush others to win. They only need not to play their game. Seneca expressed it with his usual clarity. No one is more powerful than he who can master his own tongue. Silence is the art of mastering your tongue before your tongue masters you. Because once words are spoken, they no longer belong to you. They can be twisted, misunderstood, or destroy what you meant to protect. But silence remains yours. It's private territory no one enters without permission. Many confuse silence with weakness. They think those who stay quiet concede, that those who don't respond lose. But that's only true when silence is born from fear. The silence of the wise doesn't come from fear, it comes from control. It's an unspoken declaration. I don't need to convince you, because I already understand. And that understanding weighs more than any argument. When you learn to use silence as affirmation, you realize that many battles aren't won by speaking, but by enduring. Picture an argument. The other person raises their voice, tries to pull you into their storm, waiting for your reaction to feed on it. If you fall for it, you lose. If you stay silent, you disarm them. Silence cuts the flow of the other person's emotion. Without fuel, the fire dies. In that moment, silence becomes an invisible wall that protects your peace. You don't need to explain, you don't need to justify yourself. Your calm is the response. And nothing confuses a disturbed mind more than someone who refuses to play along. But not all silence is virtue. There are cowardly silences, complicit silences, silences that hide from truth. Wise silence is not the one that avoids, it's the one that chooses. It's not about always being quiet, but about knowing when noise would worsen what silence has already resolved. The Stoic is silent when words would be excessive, but he speaks when justice demands it. His silence is never submission, it's strategy, and his words, when they come, carry the weight of thought. Silence also communicates respect. When you listen without interrupting, when you make space for another's voice, you're saying, your experience matters. And at the same time, you're affirming your own mastery. Because listening isn't submission, it's understanding. And understanding doesn't mean yielding, it means seeing more broadly. The wise know that most conflicts aren't unresolved because of lack of words, but because of too many. Sometimes all that's missing is a pause, a breath, a moment of silence. Silence is therapeutic. It heals what noise confuses. In silence, the mind reorganizes, the body rests, the soul reunites with itself. That's why the ancient sages sought solitude, not because they hated the world, but because they knew constant noise silences the inner voice. And without that voice, man loses direction. Silence, then, is not absence of life. It's the space where life regains its natural shape. There's a special beauty in the conversation between two people unafraid of silence. That pause between words where there's no discomfort, only understanding. That moment where the soul speaks without a voice. Love, friendship, loyalty, all deep relationships share that kind of silence. Because authentic connection doesn't need constant reassurance, it's felt, not declared. And when it's declared, it only confirms what already fills the air. But silence doesn't just communicate outward, it speaks inward too. It's in silence that you realize what you truly feel. What seemed confusing in the noise becomes clear in stillness. What seemed urgent in chaos becomes insignificant in calm. Introspection blooms only when the mind stops making sound. That's why silence is training. The more you practice it, the more you hear. Not the world's voices, but your own. And once you hear your inner voice clearly, no one can manipulate you. Silence is a boundary. It defines what you control and what you don't. It teaches you to tell apart what deserves a response and what deserves to be forgotten. What requires words and what requires distance. Not everything deserves a reply. Not everything deserves your energy. Each time you choose silence over reaction, you affirm your freedom. Each time you observe instead of interrupt, you affirm your wisdom. Each time you wait instead of forcing, you affirm your power. There is no better display of mastery than staying silent when everyone else is shouting. In this age of endless opinions, the silence of the wise is a revolutionary act. While everyone else drowns in the noise of their own urgency, you become the still point they seek without knowing it. Your calm becomes an uncomfortable mirror, but also a beacon. Because those who keep silent don't disappear, they stand out. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "When you have the choice to speak or to remain silent, choose what best preserves your tranquility." That's the compass. Don't stay silent out of fear. Don't speak out of impulse. Choose what protects the peace of your soul. Peace isn't bargained, it's guarded. And silence is its oldest shield. Remember this. Silence isn't emptiness, it's density. It's not lack of voice, it's control of frequency. It's not passivity, it's contained power. Once you master it, your presence will speak for you. In conversation, your gaze will say more than your words. In conflict, your serenity will weigh more than your arguments. In loss, your calm will inspire more than 1,000 consolations. The wise don't seek to be understood by everyone, because they know many fear the language of silence. But the few who do understand it never forget it. Because silence leaves invisible but indelible marks the imprint of someone who was present without imposing, who listened without judging, who loved without possessing. And once you master that art, you'll notice something surprising. You'll no longer fear the silence of others. Because you'll understand that not all silences are rejection. Some are respect, some are reflection, and some are simply shared presence. Silence stops being a threat and becomes a home. So when the world provokes you, remember, not everything requires words. Sometimes the wisest answer is the one left unspoken. Silence also speaks, and often it speaks better than you. And in that stillness where words fade and the mind clears, the next Stoic lesson arises, one that dives even deeper than control, to renounce the ego in order to choose peace. If something within you felt clarity or calm as you heard these words, follow that impulse and subscribe. Do it not out of routine, but out of respect for your own mind. Subscribing isn't a favor to this podcast, it's a silent declaration that you've chosen to think differently, to live with more intention, and to act with the serenity of someone no longer ruled by noise. Do it now, and share this message with someone ready to awaken. Because when one mind learns to think slowly and act precisely, it inevitably inspires another to do the same. 6th Stoic rule. Don't seek to be right, seek to be at peace. There are battles you win by arguing but lose inside. You can be right and still feel empty. You can win the argument and lose your calm. You can prove your intelligence and destroy your serenity in the process. That's the cruelest paradox of the human mind, confusing intellectual victory with inner peace. The wise understand this. That's why they choose silence over dispute, understanding over confrontation, peace over pride. The desire to be right is a www.com refined form of ego. It's the urge to make the world align with your vision, for others to recognize your truth, for no one to dare challenge what you believe is correct. But life isn't designed to confirm your ideas, it's designed to expand them, and as long as you cling to imposing your truth, you remain its prisoner. Marcus Aurelius wrote with implacable serenity, If someone shows you you're wrong, thank them, for they've freed you from error. That gratitude for correction is a level of maturity few ever reach. The immature mind needs to be right to feel secure. The mature mind needs to understand to feel free. That difference separates the wise from the rest. When you seek to understand, you don't care who wins the argument, you care that truth emerges, even if it doesn't favor you. But when you seek to be right, your identity becomes a prison. Your self-esteem depends on others accepting your version. And every time someone questions it, you react as if your very existence were under attack. Ego turns every disagreement into war. Wisdom turns it into opportunity. Seneca warned that the man who always tries to convince others is really trying to convince himself. That's why the wise don't argue to impose, they speak to illuminate. If the other person doesn't see, they don't force, they wait. They know every mind has its own rhythm. Every consciousness awakens in its own time. There's no victory in proving something to someone who doesn't want to understand, only exhaustion. Peace, on the other hand, comes when you accept that not everyone can see from your level of clarity. Not out of malice, but because each is fighting their own inner battle. Epictetus said it plainly: don't try to teach those who don't wish to learn. The wise don't waste energy trying to change what's beyond their control. Their truth doesn't need to be declared, it's demonstrated. They don't seek to convince with words, but with example. Truth, when lived with coherence, becomes evident on its own, and those who still can't see it simply aren't ready. Understanding that isn't resignation, it's spiritual intelligence. Seeking peace isn't surrender, it's discernment. It's knowing which battles are worth fighting. Understanding that some conversations don't lead to truth, only to fatigue. That some minds don't seek understanding, they seek to win. That some people confuse dialogue with the battleground of ego. And the wise don't play that game. Not because they lack arguments, but because they know peace is worth more than any display of intellect. Every time you choose not to argue, it's not weakness, it's mastery. You've conquered the need to be right, and that places you above conflict. Sometimes true wisdom lies in staying silent when you could humiliate, in walking away when you could dominate, in smiling when you could prove you're right. Not because you're wrong, but because you no longer need to be right. The need to be right is emotional poverty, dressed as justice. Those who know themselves don't need recognition. Their peace doesn't depend on others thinking the same. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "There's no better way to defeat your enemy than not to resemble him." When you argue with someone ruled by ego, even if you win the argument, you lose your virtue. Your mind gets stained by theirs. Your serenity becomes tainted. The wise act like the river, it doesn't push, it flows. It knows that even the hardest rock is shaped by patient water. That's how the strong mind acts. It doesn't confront, it transforms. Seeking peace doesn't mean ignoring injustice. It means responding with clarity, not anger. The Stoic doesn't stay silent before wrongdoing, but he chooses how to face it. He doesn't react from fire, he acts from reason, because he knows that rage clouds judgment, and even truth spoken in anger becomes poison. The justice of the wise doesn't shout, it acts quietly but leaves its mark. Their peace isn't cowardice, it's strategy. Every time you give in to the need to be right, you lose something invisible, your center. You become hostage to others' validation. And that dependency is one of the most common forms of emotional slavery. The mind that needs approval will never be free. But the mind that chooses peace, even when misunderstood by the world, will always be sovereign. Epictetus said with irony, If you wish others to think like you, first accept that you can't think like everyone. That acceptance is freedom. In human relationships, this rule is tested constantly. We argue with those we love, thinking we defend truth when we're actually defending our ego. We want to be understood not out of love for reason, but out of fear of rejection. But those who truly love you don't need you to be right to respect you, and those who respect you only when convinced don't love you, they're judging you. Learning that distinction saves years of conflict. There are moments when peace requires leaving others with their version, not because you've abandoned yours, but because you know the discussion no longer adds value. The energy you spend convincing could be used creating. Every unnecessary argument is a distraction from your purpose. Every emotional defense is a leak of strength. The wise don't get sidetracked. They know their time and mind are treasures too valuable to waste on deaf ears. The mind that seeks peace learns the art of letting go of the need to explain, to correct, to be understood. When you no longer need that, you feel a new kind of lightness. Not because the world has changed, but because you no longer carry its noise within you. Peace doesn't come from outside, it comes from inner order. And that order is built each time you choose to stay quiet, to breathe, to walk away without the burden of needing to convince anyone. The wise don't live to be right, they live to be in harmony with truth. And truth doesn't always need defense, sometimes it only needs coherence. The peaceful mind doesn't seek to win debates, it seeks to understand causes. It doesn't need the last word, it seeks a free mind. It doesn't aim to dominate, it aims to flow. Because the victory gained through arguing lasts a moment, the one gained through calm lasts a lifetime. Seneca said, "The tranquil spirit sees things clearly." In the midst of conflict, those who keep their peace see what others cannot. They don't get swept away by emotion. While others shout, they observe. While others panic, they decide. That lucidity allows them to act precisely while others are lost in confusion. That's the superiority of the wise. They're not above others, they're above their own agitation. When you choose peace, you stop playing the world's game, and that unsettles people. Others expect reaction, defense, response, but you're no longer there. Your energy is focused on what you can control, your thoughts, your actions, your serenity. That independence makes you a different kind of presence, even an unsettling one. Because nothing confuses more than someone who doesn't need to be right to feel whole. In the end, what separates the wise from the ordinary isn't knowledge, it's mastery over ego. Everyone wants to be right, few want to be at peace, and those few are the ones who inspire. Because while the rest fight to be heard, they walk in silence, knowing that truth needs no noise. Remember this: you can lose the argument and still win your life. You can be misunderstood and still be at peace. You can yield the last word and keep your power. Don't seek to be right, seek to be at peace, because being right feeds the ego, but peace nourishes the soul. And once you attain that calm, you'll discover the next level of Stoic intelligence. Learning to read. Intentions, not words. 7th Stoic rule. Learn to read intentions, not words. The world is full of beautiful speeches and twisted hearts. Words can be dressed in virtue, but the soul doesn't always walk beside them. That's why the wise are never seduced by what they hear, but by what they perceive behind it. They learn to read the intention, not the surface, to see the invisible. Because in human nature, what's essential is never said, it's revealed. We live in an age where everyone speaks of values, authenticity, love, and justice. Yet few live what they preach. Words have become cheap, bought easily, and spent carelessly. In that ocean of noise, the naive mind drowns. It believes hollow promises, confuses feigned empathy with kindness, mistakes politeness for sincerity. But the Stoic observes, they don't react to what's said, they analyze the motive. They don't listen to the tone, they perceive the intention. Epictetus explained it with clarity. Judge not things by how they appear, but by what they are. Applying that to people is an art. It requires a cool mind and a steady heart. It means looking beyond the compliment, the kind gesture, the persuasive speech. Words seduce, actions reveal. The wise understand that every human being, whether aware or not, projects their truth through details. The glance that avoids, the pause before speaking, the energy that shifts when they no longer need something from you. Words can lie, but energy never does. Marcus Aurelius practiced this with military precision. As emperor, he heard flattery, daily promises of loyalty, speeches of admiration, but he knew how to read the silence between phrases. He knew ambition always dresses itself as respect. That's why he wrote in his meditations, "Observe not what they say, but what they desire when they say it." That line is a moral compass. Because the wise aren't fooled by appearances, they understand that every act, even the noblest, hides a purpose. And knowing that purpose is what separates naivete from wisdom. Seneca warned that most people fake virtue out of fear of being discovered. In other words, the world is full of masks, some so well made they deceive even the wearer. That's why the Stoic learns to see without falling in love with words. Their gaze isn't distrustful, it's lucid. They don't suspect everything, but they're deceived by nothing. That neutrality is a form of power. While others are shaken by what they hear, the wise quietly translate what others feel without it being spoken. Reading intentions isn't a mystical gift, it's conscious attention. It's observing with both mind and body the tone, the posture, the consistency between word and action. The wise don't rush to label. They wait. They let time speak, because time cannot lie. The impostor betrays himself through exhaustion. The sincere proves himself through consistency. That patience is the tool of those who see beyond appearances. The problem with the impulsive is that they want to believe. They long for beautiful words to be true because the weary soul craves refuge in illusion. But the most expensive refuge is that of false promises. The Stoic doesn't let desire cloud judgment. They prefer an uncomfortable truth to a comforting lie, because they know that what seduces you sweetly today may manipulate you tomorrow with the same tone. Stoic wisdom teaches that every human act springs from three forces: desire, fear, or duty. Those who speak from desire seek to obtain. Those who speak from fear seek to protect. Those who speak from duty seek balance. If you learn to recognize which of these roots a word grows from, you'll see clearly. You won't need explanations because you'll understand the cause behind the act. Reading intentions also means reading yourself. Sometimes it's not the other who deceives you, it's you who wants to believe. You interpret courtesy as interest, indifference as challenge, closeness as love. The mind projects what it longs to see. That's why the wise, before analyzing others, analyze themselves. Am I seeing clearly or through need? That question saves them from self-deception. Because ego, when it wants to be right, sees signs where there are only coincidences. The Stoic learns to read motives without resentment. They don't rage when used. nor grow bitter when lied to. They simply understand. They look at others with emotional distance and say, they act from their level of consciousness. They don't justify, but they don't contaminate themselves either. Because understanding isn't excusing, it's liberating. When you grasp the cause, you no longer hate the effect. That neutrality is wisdom in its purest form. In politics, love, and friendship, this rule is vital. Words can mask convenience, but coherence can't be faked for long. The wise don't need to confront to see truth. They let it reveal itself. In an argument, they observe the intention behind the claim. Does it seek truth or validation? In a compliment, they ask, is it admiration or manipulation? In an apology, they feel, is it remorse or fear of loss? Words change, intention endures. Seneca said, the soul of the wise is like a mirror. It reflects without distortion. Reading intentions is that, reflecting without projecting, not adding fear or assumption, just seeing. The trained mind notices the tiny misalignments that betray deceit, a smile that never reaches the eyes, a voice that shakes at the wrong time, a subtle contradiction between word and deed. The wise don't accuse, they register. And when they act, they do so with surgical precision. Epictetus summed it up in a phrase that feels written for our times. The ignorant react, the wise interpret. Reacting is jumping at the visible. Interpreting is reading the invisible. Those who interpret control their energy, their judgment, and their response. That's why the wise rarely feel betrayed, not because no one lies to them, but because they saw the intention before the words. Reading intentions grants freedom but also solitude. Because once you see what others can't, it becomes harder to believe in appearances again. The price of lucidity is the loss of innocence, but the reward is peace. You stop being shocked by falseness, knowing it's part of the human landscape. You no longer expect purity, but you recognize authenticity instantly, and when you find it, you treasure it like gold. The wise don't distrust everyone, only their own haste to believe. Their prudence isn't paranoia, it's self-respect. Because those who rush to believe, rush to suffer. The Stoic observes, waits, contrasts. Their mind doesn't live in suspicion, but in clarity. And that clarity is their shield, because no one can manipulate someone who sees the intention behind the speech. Once you learn to read intentions, you stop taking things personally. You realize that offense doesn't always mean harm, it often reflects the other's pain. Coldness isn't always disdain, it can be fear. Distance isn't always rejection, it can be respect. That understanding gives you immense power. You don't react, you choose. And in that choice, you reclaim your strength. Marcus Aurelius said, "The human soul reveals itself in what it pursues and what it avoids." If you observe that in others, you'll know more about them than by hearing 1,000 words. What someone avoids tells as much as what they seek. The trained mind perceives these subtle movements and acts accordingly, not to manipulate, but to relate with wisdom. Silence, once again, becomes an ally. Because only in stillness can you observe accurately. Emotional noise distorts perception. When the mind quiets, intentions become transparent. It's as if life speaks a language only silence can translate, and in that language, lies dissolve. Don't seek to be right about others. Seek to understand their motives. Not all act out of malice. Some act from ignorance, others from fear, others from lack. Understanding that doesn't mean allowing it, but it does spare you the poison of resentment. Understanding doesn't weaken your boundaries, it strengthens them. Because only when you understand what drives someone can you know how far to let them in. The mind that reads intentions doesn't need to shout for justice, it lives wisely. Because it knows truth always reveals itself, even when time disguises it. And when it does, the wise neither rejoice nor avenge. They simply nod calmly and continue on their path. Clarity is their reward. Remember this, the wise don't seek words, they seek signals. They don't need promises, they need coherence. They aren't impressed by speeches, they study patterns. And once they see the truth behind a gesture, they never forget it. Because once truth is seen, it can never be unseen. And in that clarity born of observation, the next Stoic lesson arises: to accept what you cannot control. 8th Stoic rule: accept what you cannot control. Most human suffering grows from a single root: the desire to control the uncontrollable. We fight reality as if it were an enemy meant to bend to our will. But reality doesn't bend, it's observed. The wise don't try to mold the world, they mold their response to it. They understand that true power lies not in mastering events, but in mastering themselves before them. Epictetus said it with the precision of someone who understood the human soul through pain. Some things are up to you, and some are not. Wisdom lies in knowing the difference. That distinction, so simple in appearance, is the invisible wall between peace and anguish. Those who confuse the two realms, the one they can rule and the one they cannot live, in perpetual war. They waste their energy resisting the inevitable and suffer for what no action could ever change. But those who accept are free. Acceptance is not surrender. It's looking reality in the face and saying, "This is what it is." Not from resignation, but from clarity. Acceptance is an act of inner strength, not weakness. It's recognizing that your control has limits, but your attitude does not. It's understanding that you can't choose circumstances, but you can always choose how to face them. That choice is your freedom. Marcus Aurelius, who bore the weight of an empire, wrote in his darkest nights, "If something external harms you, it's not the thing itself that troubles you, but your judgment about it." He lost children, suffered betrayals, faced wars and plagues. Yet his mind remained intact. Because he had understood that life doesn't owe perfection, only opportunity. The opportunity to practice virtue, even amid chaos. That's the essence of this rule. Accepting what you cannot control isn't surrendering to pain. It's using it as a stage for greatness. Suffering deepens when the ego refuses to let go. We want people to act as we think they should, things to follow our plan, time to obey our desires. But life doesn't negotiate with our expectations. It has its own rhythm, and resisting it is like trying to stop the tide with your hands. The more you fight the inevitable, the deeper you sink. The more you flow with what is, the lighter you become. Seneca compared it to sailing. We cannot control the wind, but we can adjust the sails. That metaphor holds the full wisdom of inner mastery. The storm doesn't depend on you, but the rudder does. Loss, injustice, change, death, you cannot prevent them, but you can decide how to go through them. You can curse the storm or use it to learn how to steer better. That choice shapes your destiny. Resistance to change is the most common source of misery. We want what feels good to last forever and what hurts to end immediately. But nature doesn't work that way. Everything is born, grows, decays, and dies. Everything you love will one day transform. Everything you fear will one day pass. Nothing endures except the flow itself. And understanding this doesn't take away emotion, it gives balance. Because when you know nothing belongs to you, you can enjoy without clinging and let go without breaking. Accepting what you cannot control is constant training. It doesn't happen once, it happens every day. In small things and big ones. When traffic delays you, when someone disappoints you, when a plan fails. When life doesn't respond to your effort, each of those moments is a reminder, this isn't up to you. And every time you choose not to be disturbed, you strengthen your mind. Every time you choose to release, you sharpen your freedom. Epictetus was a slave before becoming a teacher. His body was chained, but his mind never was. He taught that the freest person is not the one who can do whatever they want, but the one who doesn't need things to happen their way. That is true independence, not of the body, but of judgment. Because the world can take everything from you, except how you choose to interpret it. Acceptance doesn't mean indifference. The Stoic feels but isn't enslaved by feeling. They cry when they lose but aren't destroyed. They fight when they must but don't obsess over the outcome. They live intensely but without attachment. That's the difference between suffering and serenity. Suffering is born from wanting life to be different. Serenity is born from loving it as it is. Marcus Aurelius wrote a line that condenses centuries of philosophy. Love the fate that has been given to you. The Stoics called that love amor fati. It's not about romanticizing pain, but about embracing the wholeness of existence, even its shadows. It's understanding that everything that happens, even the hardest things, has a place in your growth. The wise don't ask, why me? But for what in me? That shift changes everything from lamentation to understanding. The accepting mind doesn't freeze, it acts, but without anxiety. It does what lies within its power and lets go of what doesn't. That balance action without attachment is one of the highest forms of wisdom. Because those who act without fear of outcome become unstoppable. They no longer depend on success to continue, nor failure to stop. They simply flow. Acceptance is an art of discernment. Not every battle is worth fighting. Not every offense needs defense. Not every problem needs immediate solution. Sometimes the wisest thing you can do is observe, wait, and let things settle by themselves. Not out of laziness, but out of understanding of nature's order. Life has its own way of correcting itself, and you are part of that order, not its master. The ego rebels against this idea. It wants control, direction, power. But the ego is a poor strategist. It confuses control with security and ends up losing both. The wise don't need to control everything because they trust their ability to adapt. True strength lies not in mastering events, but in mastering response. That response, steady and serene, is the mark of a mind trained in virtue. Seneca wrote, "He suffers more than necessary who suffers before it is necessary." Anticipating pain, living in anxiety over what might happen, is a form of self-inflicted torture. The wise stay in the present, knowing the future exists only in the mind. And in the present, things are almost always bearable. Fear grows in the gap between what is and what might be. Acceptance closes that gap and restores calm. Accepting what you cannot control also teaches trust. Trust in the process, in time, in life. Not in a passive sense, but as rational faith. Knowing that even if you don't yet see the purpose, clarity will come. That even if something hurts now, it may be forging a stronger version of you. That trust isn't naive hope, it's practical wisdom. The certainty that resisting the inevitable only delays your growth. When you learn to accept, you discover a freedom the world can't take from you. You realize nothing external can disturb you without your permission. Chaos has no power over you unless you invite it in. Even in the midst of disaster, you can keep your center. That stability doesn't come from luck, it comes from practice. From every day, you choose to release control of the external to affirm control of the internal. The wise don't become indifferent, they become even-minded. They can live pleasure without losing calm, and endure pain without losing faith. Because they've understood that both pleasure and pain are disguised teachers. And when life becomes difficult, they no longer curse it. They thank it for the chance to test their strength. Acceptance makes them like rock, but rock that flows like water. In the end, accepting what you cannot control doesn't mean giving up your power. It means using it precisely, directing your energy only toward what depends on you. Your thoughts, your decisions, your actions, and letting everything else take its course. That's the difference between the one who suffers through life and the one who masters it. Remember this, peace doesn't come when life bends to your will, it comes when you bend to reality. Don't wait for life to become predictable. Train your mind to be unshakable, because once you do, nothing can break you. And in that calm born of acceptance, the next Stoic lesson appears. Not to boast of what you know, but to prove that you live it. 9th Stoic rule. Don't boast about what you know, prove that you live it. Knowledge without practice is an elegant form of ignorance. To know much yet live little of it is like having treasure and starving beside it. In the age of information, everyone seems wise, but few are coherent. Many speak of virtue, yet react in anger. They quote philosophers, but live ruled by desire. They speak of peace, yet dwell in conflict. Wisdom is not measured by what you say, it's revealed in what you embody. The true sage doesn't boast of intellect, he demonstrates mastery. Epictetus taught this bluntly. Don't say you are a philosopher, act like one. Don't declare yourself, just be so. Don't talk about self-control, practice it. Don't decorate yourself with words of virtue, turn them into habit. Because words without conduct are smoke, and smoke leaves no roots. Living what you preach is the only form of authenticity, and in a world that never stops talking, those who act in silence shine with a different light. The temptation to boast is subtle. Ego easily disguises itself as wisdom. It feeds on admiration, on the need to appear conscious, to be seen as someone who knows. But the Stoic understands that real intelligence needs no witnesses. Marcus Aurelius, surrounded by flatterers, wrote to himself, "Do good and forget it." He didn't seek recognition, he sought coherence. A virtuous act loses its purity when done to be seen. Knowledge loses its power when worn as decoration. Seneca, in his letters to Lucilius, warned, "It's not enough to learn philosophy, you must live it." And that's the line that divides the scholar from the sage. The scholar accumulates ideas, the sage turns them into character. The first impresses, the second transforms. True knowledge doesn't make you speak better, it makes you live better. And those who live better need no display. Their serenity is their speech. The danger of shallow knowledge is that it creates the illusion of progress. It convinces you that understanding is enough. You read about calm but still react. You speak of acceptance but still complain. You repeat quotes about inner control but remain enslaved to emotion. You believe you know but haven't yet begun to practice. And in that self-deception, you stagnate. Epictetus called it closed-mouth wisdom, knowledge that lives only on the tongue, not in the life. Practicing what you know is an act of humility, because it admits that understanding isn't enough. It requires acknowledging that the real test appears in discomfort, in irritation, disappointment, contradiction. That's when you see whether your words are convictions or intellectual decorations. There's no greater virtue than coherence between thought and action, and no greater hypocrisy than preaching balance while living in turmoil. The wise don't preach, they emanate. Their mere presence communicates more than any speech. They are calm amid noise, composed amid provocation, serene amid chaos. They don't say, "I'm stoic." People sense it. Because their mastery needs no name, their virtue no banner. True power always manifests without shouting. Marcus Aurelius never wrote meditations to be published. He did it as a personal exercise to guard his coherence. That is the heart of Stoicism, inner vigilance. The sage doesn't ask, "What do others know of me?" but, "Am I faithful to what I know?" That question follows him everywhere, because knowledge isn't proven by words but by presence. And presence isn't trained by talking, it's trained by living. Deep down, boasting is fear. Fear of being unseen, unrecognized, or insignificant. But those who live virtuously need no applause. Their life is their argument, and that makes them dangerous to a world addicted to attention. The sage doesn't compete in the market of appearances, he simply exists. His coherence carries a silent authority that unsettles hypocrisy. Seneca said, "We learn not to display, but to use." Learning philosophy, self-mastery, virtue, means nothing if it doesn't translate into action. There's no merit in repeating the ideas of others if you can't apply them when life tests you. You could read the Stoics for a lifetime, yet if you despair at adversity, you've learned nothing. Unapplied knowledge becomes burden. It fills you with theory but empties you of action. It makes you critical but not wise. Coherence is a form of beauty, not the kind that's shown, but the kind that's felt. The beauty of upright character, of a serene gaze, of gestures that need no explanation. The sage is beautiful because he's aligned. His words and deeds move in the same direction. In him there are no cracks between thought, feeling, and action. That integrity, though invisible, radiates natural authority. No one can fake it for long. The Stoic doesn't use his knowledge as a weapon, but as a compass, not to prove superiority, but to stay the course. He doesn't seek to teach, but to remember. He knows life will test what he thinks he knows every day, and each test will measure his coherence. Anger, frustration, impatience, envy. Each one is life asking, "Have you really learned?" Every reaction is your answer. Marcus Aurelius also fell, doubted, grew angry, but always returned to practice. "It's not that things are difficult because we don't try," he wrote, "but that we don't try because they are difficult. Knowledge without effort is sterile. Constant practice turns theory into flesh, concept into character." That's why the sage repeats mental exercises daily like an athlete of the soul. He doesn't seek perfection, he seeks consistency. Coherence is also humility, because it means accepting your falls without excuse. There's no shame in failing consciously. The tragedy lies in preaching virtue while denying your flaws. The wise observe themselves without hate or justification. They recognize contradiction, analyze it, correct it. They don't flaunt perfection, they honor effort. Because mastery isn't a destination, it's an unending path. Epictetus said philosophy isn't a speech, it's a way of living. If your words don't change your conduct, they aren't philosophy, they're noise. and the world already has enough noise. The sage, instead, seeks inner silence. That silence comes only when thought, word, and action move as one. Then guilt, anxiety, and fragmentation vanish. What remains is calm, the calm of one who no longer acts to impress, but simply to be. To practice what you know makes you a beacon, not because you seek to guide anyone, but because you illuminate without trying. Those who observe you learn not from your words, but from your being. That's the deepest teaching, the invisible example. The human soul doesn't follow theories, it follows coherence. And coherence radiates a silent authority no speech can equal. The mind that applies what it knows no longer seeks recognition, it seeks evolution. It doesn't compare with others, it measures itself against its former self. Each day it asks, am I acting more in line with what I know? If the answer is yes, there is progress. And that progress, though unseen, is life's truest victory. Seneca wrote, "What is known but not applied is as good as not known." That sentence should be carved into every temple of thought. Wisdom isn't stored, it's embodied. It's not measured in books, but in deeds. It's not displayed, it's proven in adversity. Only when you apply what you've learned in your hardest moments does it become part of you. Everything else is intellectual decoration. That's why the wise don't need to declare their philosophy, it's visible. In their calm, in their patience, in their ability to wait without anxiety and act without haste. In their refusal to be shaken by criticism or inflated by praise. Because they know both are illusions. Those who live for applause are enslaved by it. Those who live by practice are free. Don't boast of what you know. Apply it in every conversation, every frustration, every silence. Constant practice is the sage's prayer. He needs no temples, only coherence. Because every time you choose virtue over pride, you're practicing philosophy in its purest form. Remember, knowledge that doesn't transform your life only distracts you from it. Don't study to seem wise, study to stop suffering. Don't quote the Stoics to impress, apply them to live in peace. For true wisdom isn't proven when you speak, but when you stay silent and remain balanced. And when you achieve that harmony between thought and action, you'll gain what few possess. The world's silent respect, not the kind that's applauded, but the kind that's felt. And then, you'll be ready for the final lesson, the one that completes the circle. Think slowly, act precisely. 10th Stoic rule. Think slowly, act precisely. Most of the mistakes that ruin a life don't come from malice, but from haste. A rushed mind is a silent enemy. It acts before understanding, reacts before observing, decides before thinking. In a world that glorifies speed, slow, thinking has become an act of rebellion. But for the Stoic, slowness isn't laziness, it's power. Those who learn to pause for a single instant before acting master something most never notice. The space between impulse and decision. And in that small space, a man's destiny is defined. Epictetus taught it with clarity that transcended centuries. It's not what happens to you that disturbs you, but how you interpret it. And interpretation cannot happen in a rush. The slow mind is the mind that sees. Haste clouds judgment, distorts reality, confuses urgency with importance. The wise, instead, allow themselves to linger. They observe, analyze, feel. They don't act to prove control. They act when they have it. Their slowness is strategy, not weakness. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, wrote, "Pause and examine. two words that summarize an entire philosophy. For to pause is a luxury only the strong can afford. The weak need to react quickly, to respond fast so they don't feel powerless. The strong know calm is a weapon. That silence, when wielded wisely, disarms any provocation. That deliberate thought doesn't delay action, it perfects it. Thinking slowly doesn't mean doubting endlessly. It means seeing the full picture before moving. It means not being swept away by emotion or the pressure of others. Stoic slowness isn't passivity, it's precision. It's acting only when the soul is aligned with reason, because a decision born of serenity is worth more than 100 made from impulse. Seneca warned that haste is a kind of madness. He knew that time misused becomes an enemy. When you act without thinking, you become a slave to the outcome. But when you think slowly, you master the process. The Stoic doesn't seek speed, he seeks accuracy. Every thought is an arrow he sharpens patiently before releasing. And when he finally acts, he doesn't miss, because his action is the culmination of a mind that has already conquered urgency. We live in an age that confuses movement with progress. People rush from one thing to another, answer messages, change opinions, react to everything. Yet few truly advance. Because progress isn't moving a lot, it's moving well. And moving well demands pause. It demands thought. It demands clarity. The wise don't compete to act first, but to act best. Their life isn't ruled by speed, but by precision. Stoicism teaches that every impulse must be examined before execution. Not to repress it, but to understand it. Where does it come from? What feeds it? What effect will it have? The wise don't suppress emotions, they translate them into wisdom. Their mind doesn't kill passion, it channels it. They think slowly because they know today's decision can have irreversible consequences tomorrow. Every word they speak, every gesture they choose, every action they take is born of reflection. The hurried mind seeks relief, the trained mind seeks understanding. That's why, while others chase quick fixes, the wise stop to grasp the root of the problem. They don't obsess over putting out fires, they learn not to start them. Their slowness is a form of spiritual economy. They save energy for what truly matters. They don't respond to everything, don't intervene in everything, don't fix everything. They act only where their action has meaning. Epictetus said, "When emotion rises, don't speak. That is the essence of inner mastery." Words, spoken in a storm, are arrows shot blind. They almost always wound the innocent. The wise breathe. They count to 10 or to 100 if needed. They wait for the water of their mind to settle, and only then look at the reflection. What they see is no longer a distortion born of anger, but reality itself. Acting from that clarity is what separates those who destroy from those who build. Marcus Aurelius asked himself each morning, "What does reason demand of me now?" That question saved him from impulse and brought him back to the present. Because thinking slowly isn't an intellectual exercise, it's an act of respect for life. It's admitting that your decisions don't just affect you, but those around you. Every thoughtless action sends ripples farther than you imagine. That's why the wise pause not out of fear but responsibility. The mind that thinks slowly also learns to listen without preparing a reply, to listen without anxiety to respond, to listen to understand, not to win. Such deep listening is among the highest forms of intelligence because it allows you to perceive what the other feels beyond what they say. It teaches you to read the human soul without judgment. And those who understand before acting almost never err. Seneca warned that time is the most wasted human resource. We live as if we were eternal, yet we die every day. Thinking slowly is not wasting time, it's making the most of it. The mind that rushes wastes. The mind that reflects multiplies. Life isn't about living fast, but lucidly. Each decision made in calm extends your serenity. Each reaction made in haste extends your suffering. The Stoic doesn't fear slowness, he fears carelessness. That's why he walks measuring each step, speaks weighing each word, loves knowing all things fade. His life isn't built on grand gestures, but on precise decisions. And that precision doesn't come from luck, it's born of reflection. It's the fruit of a mind trained to observe before acting, knowing there's no action more powerful than one born of inner silence. Thinking slowly also means stopping the urge to flee. Because haste is often fear in disguise, fear of feeling, of erring, of facing what emerges when you pause. But the wise don't flee, they stay. They look their fear in the eye, analyze it, dismantle it, and in doing so, the mind stops being a slave to impulse and becomes master of itself. Mastery begins the moment you learn to stand still. Epictetus insisted the sage must train the mind like an archer trains aim. It's not about shooting many arrows, but about shooting well. Each well-shaped thought is an arrow that hits the mark. Each rushed thought is one that gets lost. The difference between failure and accuracy is often a pause, and that pause, invisible to the world, is the secret of mastery. Thinking slowly and acting precisely isn't a luxury, it's a discipline. It requires training the mind not to be dragged by emotional urgency or social pressure. It means knowing when to move and when to wait. It means mastering the art of the pause. In that pause, the wise renew themselves. In that pause, emotion dissolves. In that pause, truth appears. Marcus Aurelius, weary from war, wrote in his journal, "Be like the rock that the sea relentlessly strikes firm until the waves calm around it." That firmness doesn't come from rigidity, but from clarity. Once your mind learns to think slowly, no storm can sweep you away. Because clarity is stronger than force. The world will tell you that slowness is weakness, that thinking too much is wasting time. But the wise know that the time spent thinking saves years of regret. Every rash error costs more than 1,000 mindful pauses. Haste is the mother of regret, slowness the father of wisdom. Seneca captured it perfectly. He who lives according to reason lives in tranquility. Thinking slowly is living according to reason. Acting precisely is living in harmony with it. There's no greater freedom than choosing your movements without being a slave to the moment. The quick mind reacts, the slow mind decides. And every decision made from calm becomes another brick in the foundation of your serenity. The wise don't seek to appear calculated, they seek to be conscious. Because they know that every word, every silence, every action shapes their character, and character is destiny. That's why before speaking, think. Before acting, breathe. Before judging, understand. And when you finally decide, do so with the precision of one who has meditated every movement into virtue. The slowness of the sage isn't inaction, it's art. The art of moving only when the soul is still. The art of acting with surgical precision without effort, without doubt, without noise. Because when thought and action align, error becomes impossible. Everything done from that calm carries the strength of truth. Remember, speed dazzles, but precision transforms. Haste conquers, but also destroys. The slow mind doesn't waste time, it gains it. For in the time others spend reacting, you are choosing consciously. And conscious choice is humanity's highest privilege. Think slowly, act precisely. Not to control the result, but to honor the process. Let every decision be a work of your serenity, not a product of your anxiety. Let every step be firm, not fast. Let every word you speak come from a mind already at peace with itself. And when you reach that point, when your mind moves with the elegance of clear thought and your action with the accuracy of a tranquil soul, you will have arrived at the highest peak of Stoic intelligence, the perfect union of reason and virtue. And with that clarity, you are ready to close this path of 10 rules with one final reflection, a conclusion not just to summarize, but to awaken, the echo of an awakened mind. There comes a moment almost imperceptible when something inside you fades and something else begins to ignite. There are no lights, no applause, no grand revelations, only silence. A silence so deep it frightens you, because for the first time in a long while, you don't need to prove anything. You're not reacting to anyone. You're not running from yourself. It's the moment you realize that intelligence isn't about collecting answers. It's about holding questions. That power doesn't lie in control, but in understanding. That calm isn't the end of the path, it's the beginning of a different kind of life. You've crossed 10 doors, and each one stripped away a layer. It taught you that it's not about thinking like the ancient sages, but feeling as they did, with mastery, with temperance, with a quiet elegance the modern world has forgotten. Because today everyone wants to be admired, but few want to be conscious. Everyone wants to be right, but few want to be at peace. Everyone wants to speak, but no one listens. And you, if you've come this far, are no longer part of that sleeping crowd. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his final pages, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." If your thoughts are fast, you'll be chaotic. If they're shallow, you'll be fragile. But if you learn to think slowly, to apply what you know, to observe the world without judgment, you become dangerous. Not because you harm, but because you cannot be harmed. Not because you manipulate, but because no one can manipulate you. A mind like that doesn't bend before provocation or kneel before fear. A mind like that walks with the calm of one who has seen the essential. Perhaps that's the true meaning of being dangerously intelligent. Not to master others, but to stop being mastered by your own impulses. Not to have more information, but more awareness. Not to control the world, but to govern yourself when the world loses order. Within that lucidity lies a power. Few understand, a silent, nearly invisible power, so steady that those who glimpse it cannot ignore it. Seneca said, "The wise man seeks neither to be feared nor admired, but to be understood by himself." And understanding yourself is a task without end. Each day you'll face new trials, anger disguised as justice, fear disguised as prudence, ego disguised as confidence. But now you carry a light, not a set of rigid rules, but an inner compass. 10 principles that haven't taught you something new, but reminded you of what you always knew. That true mastery isn't conquered, it awakens. When the mind begins to awaken, confusion often follows. You feel out of place in trivial conversations, unable to join the collective complaint, too lucid for a world addicted to distraction. And that's where the solitude of the wise appears. But it isn't sad, it's freedom. It's the distance that lets you see without being tainted, feel without being lost, love without clinging. It's proof that you're evolving. Think of a still lake. On the surface, nothing seems to move, yet beneath, everything flows in harmony. That's the Stoic mind. It doesn't need noise to transform. Its changes are invisible, but decisive. When the world tries to stir its surface, its depths remain untouched. That's the difference between those who react and those who understand. The first break with every blow. The second, like water, absorb, adapt, and continue flowing. Epictetus said the wise, "Don't choose what happens, they choose how to interpret it." And you, if you're here, have already begun to choose differently. You no longer chase the immediate, argue out of pride, or waste energy trying to control the uncontrollable. You've realized that the most dangerous thing a human can possess isn't power over others, but power over oneself. For those who master themselves need not dominate. Those who know themselves need not explain. Those who accept themselves cease to fear. Perhaps no one will tell you this, but reaching this point has a price. The price of seeing too much, feeling too much, understanding too much. Once you perceive the mechanism of human ego, you can't unsee its masks. Once you discern the intentions behind words, you can't hide in naivety. But that price comes with a silent reward. Freedom. The freedom not to react, not to fear, not to depend on others' approval. The freedom to be yourself without needing to be understood. And yet, beyond calm, there's something the Stoics intuited but rarely spoke aloud. Mystery. The mystery of existence, why we're here, why we suffer, why we seek meaning, knowing all is fleeting. The ancient sages didn't promise certainty, they offered direction. Because intelligence doesn't eliminate mystery, it honors it. It contemplates without anxiety, inhabits without fleeing. Perhaps that's what makes you truly dangerous, the ability to live without needing to understand everything. When the noise of the world overwhelms you, remember, haste is the voice of unconsciousness, calm is the language of the soul. If you can think slowly amid chaos, you've already won. If you can keep your mind serene while others lose theirs, you've already transcended. And if you can love without needing to possess, reason without losing feeling, act without losing silence, then you've reached the balance the Stoics called wisdom. But don't fool yourself, the path doesn't end here. No one reaches final wisdom. You simply move a little closer each day. And the true danger of a lucid mind isn't its knowledge, it's its humility. For while the ignorant believe themselves owners of truth, the wise see themselves as students of the universe. That humility shields them from pride, vanity, and illusion. Ask yourself before sleeping, what part of me still reacts instead of reasons? What emotions do I still feed that no longer serve me? What battles am I still fighting that aren't mine? Each answer will be a mirror, and in those mirrors, you'll discover the corners where noise still lives. But don't fear the noise without it. You wouldn't recognize silence. Without error, there'd be no virtue. Without shadow, no form. Seneca captured it with tender brutality. No wind is favorable to the sailor who doesn't know to which port he sails. Now you know, or at least you sense. And that sense is enough. For the wise need no map, only direction. The dangerous mind isn't the one that knows everything. It's the one that keeps seeking without losing its calm, the one that can live within doubt without becoming it. In the end, to be dangerously intelligent isn't an external achievement, it's an inner transformation. It's not becoming superior, it's becoming clear, not accumulating ideas, but shedding illusions. Not controlling the world, but being at peace with it. When you can say, nothing external rules me, nothing internal betrays me, you will have discovered the highest form of intelligence, serenity. And if these words resonated within you, don't let them fade. Don't seek to share wisdom, become it. Live in such a way that your calm unsettles, your serenity inspires, your silence teaches. If something in you felt freer hearing this, follow that impulse. Subscribing isn't a gesture toward this podcast, it's an act of loyalty to yourself. It means you choose to stay awake, even when the world prefers to sleep. It means you're ready to live with intention, think with depth, and feel without fear. Do it. Not for us, for you. Because when one mind awakens, it inevitably awakens another. And perhaps that's the true purpose of all this, that you become the echo of a mind that thinks slowly, acts precisely, and lives in peace while the rest of the world keeps running, unaware of why. Your voice is essential here. Every reflection strengthens and elevates our community, reflecting the true value of each individual and contributing to our shared Stoic identity. The reflection that receives the most support will be set as the standard of this community of Stoic minds, a community that does not flee from pain but walks through it with courage, with wisdom, with honor. We will see each other in our next gathering at Stoicism for Winners, where we will continue exploring the riches of Stoic wisdom applied to modern life. Now, take the opportunity to deepen your Stoic practice with new recommended podcast sessions. Follow us so you don't miss any reflection that could help you at just the moment when everything feels overwhelming. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we publish episodes designed to accompany you when life feels heavy, when it's hard to stay calm, when you need a word to remind you who you are. Not following us is to risk missing exactly that lesson that could bring back the peace you have been seeking. Until we meet again, remember, you are the sole owner of your perception, the creator of your peace, and the warrior of your own battle. This is the legacy of Stoicism, the art of being invincible.